how's it going everybody? We're back with another video today. Today we'll be covering all the turbo stuff, so I got quite a bit of stuff I need to get done. The main thing is swapping out the flange for the turbo. Right now I have a 4-bolt style exhaust turbine, so I prefer the V-band styles. If anybody runs the 4-bolt styles, you guys might know that it's a pain trying to get it off, trying to get the downpipe off. That bolt on the bottom is always a pain to get off, and with almost no room left in the engine bay, it's just a pain. So today we're going to be simplifying the process. We're going to be swapping over to a V-band style exhaust, so that means changing stuff on the turbine side, changing stuff on the downpipe. We're also going to be redoing the oil line for the turbo return. We're going to be swapping over from a typical AN line, which a lot of people like to run, to a PTFE line, which is a bit sturdier line. It can take higher temperatures. It's a different material, and there's a little bit different process to installing it. So that's what we'll be doing today, so let's get into it.
Alright, so here we are taking apart the turbo here. I was initially planning on replacing the turbine housing and downsizing it. I was going to go with a 0.63 AR housing, but when I went to go fit it up to a turbo, it was just too small and it didn't want to work. So I decided, you know what, screw it. Let me just weld on a flange directly onto the turbo itself and just get rid of the 4-bolt system. So that's what I ended up doing. I used some 309 just to weld the stainless onto the steel, and I was initially afraid of it warping the flange a bit too much. But when I went to go check it, it was actually pretty flat. I still want to try a smaller turbine housing, but I think what I'll do is wait till we go to the track and get some proper seat time, and then from there I can figure out whether or not the turbo will work. If it does work, then I'll just keep it and send it. But if I feel like I want a bit more response out of it, then I'll go ahead and downsize later on.
Alright, so we're back after welding out the flange to the turbine for the turbo here. It actually came out really nice. So now that we got this welded out, the next part is welding out the flange for the downpipe here. So I already went ahead and got the rest of the exhaust bolted up. I got the mid pipe and the muffler, and I got it bolted up at the bottom here for the downpipe. So now I'm pretty sure we already did a video like this in the past, but essentially all I did was I already went ahead and cut the flange for the downpipe. Actually, let me go ahead and show you. So as you can see, this is the previous flange that bolted up to the turbine. I just went ahead and cut it with my bandsaw, so we don't need that anymore. So now I already have the new flange here mounted up. It's not tacked, it's not anything, it's just kind of snug fit in place. Right now I have everything jacked up as well, so it's just kind of putting pressure on this flange here, and everything's kind of where I need it to be. I already went ahead and made adjustments. I tweaked it, and I pushed this part into the flange, so seems to be all ready to go and ready to be welded. So now the only tricky part is making sure that nothing will move when I go ahead and weld this out. So what I'm thinking of doing is just tacking it up here on the car first, wherever I can get it. So maybe one there, one over here, and then we can take it out, fully weld it out, and then put it back in, and hopefully nothing warps too much, since it is stainless and stainless likes to warp. Hopefully it won't warp too much, and everything will just bolt up, and we'll be done with the exhaust system and the new flanges here, which, like I said before, should just make it easier to mount everything. Where if you can imagine the 4 bolts sitting like this, that bolt at the bottom is super difficult to get to, and the ones on the side. So this will just be a lot easier having a V-band system. So with that said, I'm just going to go ahead and tack everything out and pull it all out, and we can fully weld it out, and hopefully when I put everything back in, it'll fit. So yeah, let's get to it. Alright, so I have the downpipe installed again. It looks like everything is fitting up real nice. In the bottom, it's fitting up. Right here, it's aligned and it's fitting up pretty good. And there's just enough space to squeeze it through in between. That's the problem when you do a turbo build on M50s. There's almost no room to get this 3-inch pipe through. If I was to do it again, might choose to do 2.5 inch instead of 3. But the 3, with the flange, it just barely squeezes in there. The one thing I would probably redo is the turbo manifold, just to make the whole process a lot simpler and free up some space. But we're still missing some parts here. So the turbo's installed. I actually used some studs, if I forgot to talk about that. There's some studs for the T3 flange. Instead of just using regular bolts, studs make it a lot easier to get the turbo on and off. So you can just buy the studs, and it comes with the nuts to screw them on, and it's a perfect length. So I use some studs to get the turbo mounted, just to make it easier. I also went ahead and welded the oil line. It's the part that comes off of the turbo here. It's not the AN line itself, it's the adapter piece. It's hard to see, it's right there. You can see it's kind of welded right there. All I did was just kind of cut it and bend it. I moved it more towards that side, so I bent it at an angle that way. That way it just makes installing the line a lot easier, and it just clears up some space because everything is so tight. So we're also missing the wrap. Since everything gets super hot, I am going to wrap the top of this downpipe here, probably just about here, and I'm also going to add a Kevlar housing to the turbine itself. I don't know if that'll fit, so we may or may not install it, but hopefully we can, just to kind of keep a lot of the heat out of the engine bay. So now that this is installed, I'm actually going to go ahead and take it back out, since next up we got to do the oil line. So I'll get this back off, and we'll start talking about the new oil line. So this is the previous line that I had. It's a just standard AN10 line. It has a 90 on one end and a 45 on the other, and I have some kind of insulation wrapped around it. It was some kind of heat sleeve, just kind of protect it from getting warm. But instead, we're going to be swapping over, and we're going to be making a new line, since this one was leaking out of both ends. I think it was just mainly out of that end. This end actually connected to the turbo. It was leaking. So to replace this, instead of going with a standard AN line, we're going to be swapping over to a PTFE line. So that's what this one is. See that? That's a PTFE on the inside, where if I could take this off, it's just like more of a rubber on the inside. But this is actually sturdier, it's stronger, it's supposed to resist higher temperatures. It's just overall a better hose, but the only downside is it's just harder to get the fittings on, as far as I know. This is my first time messing with this kind of hosing, so we'll see how it goes. So I got the hosing there, and I also have a lot of fittings. I got a 90, which we'll need, and we got a 45. So basically, I'm just going to emulate this one here. I might not cut it exactly to this length. I'm thinking I'm going to cut it a little longer. That way, when we get it in the car, I can go ahead and use one of these just to kind of hold the hosing in place, keep it from moving around, and we can figure out how long it needs to be. So I think right now what we'll go ahead and do is get the 90 on. So we'll cut this to proper length, and we'll get the 90 on. We'll tighten it up, and then from there we can figure out how much we need, and we can get it properly cut up and done up. And as for the tooling needed, I have these giant cutters. This will help get an even cut on the stainless without leaving it all frayed up. We also have just some standard AN wrenches, as well as an adjustable. I like the adjustables. They're nice because, for example, this might be a size 10, but this over here, the actual fitting to get it on to the hose, is slightly larger. So with an adjustable, you don't really have to worry about whether or not you have the right size hose. So it's really good for installing the lines. And I also have a setup here. These are like vice jaws. They're vibrant vice jaws, and they're specially designed for AN fittings for installing them. So I'll show you guys in a bit once I get to it, but that's what these are for. You don't necessarily need these, but I bought them a while back just because I found it just make my life a lot easier to do it this way. But yeah, that's pretty much it. We got the vise, so let's get to making these lines. Alright, so now I have the AN line hooked up, the PTFE line. It's over here. So my plan is right now, I'm going to put a bracket somewhere around here. It's hard to tell because it's blurry. There you go. So my plan right now is to put a bracket right here just to kind of hold the line, just so it doesn't move around too much, because it is really close to the turbo manifold. As you can see, there's not much space, so I don't want it touching the manifold and getting extra hot. So I have these retainers. I forgot what they're called exactly, but it's a little bigger than the size of the line. So this is what I'm going to use to kind of hold it in place. And as you can see, that hole right there is an M6 hole. So I have a set of M6 screws, various lengths. So I'll just figure out what I need exactly. And I also have a riv nut kit. So I just picked this up. I'll use this to insert a riv nut. So it's like a rivet, but it's meant to screw on a bolt through it. So I'm gonna use one of those, this bad boy right there, and I'll use this tool. This came with the kit. It's used to install the tool. Pretty much it'll, as you tighten it down, it'll compress the bottom, or this part right here, the spline part of the riv nut. It'll compress it and it'll hold between the sheet metal. So this is what I'm using. I'm going to go ahead and drill it out. So I just have a step bit drill. I think this will do the job. The only problem I might have is the clearance to drill the hole. There's not much room here. So I'm just going to try my best to drill it out and get it big enough to fit the rib nut, and we can get that installed. So I'll give it a go. If it doesn't work out, then it doesn't work out. But I think we might be able to just barely squeeze in the drill here. Alright, so I got it installed. It worked, so I'm hyped about that. So the rib nut is under here. I was able to tighten it up, drill out the hole. It was a little oval, but it worked, and I got it installed. It tightened up, and now I got this clamp installed as well with an M6 bolt holding it in place. So this line is going to be not going anywhere. So that worked. The only thing I'm kind of concerned about is the rubber part here for the clamp. Since the oil line, I'm guessing it's going to get pretty hot. I'm just worried about it melting. So I guess we'll cross that bridge when we get there. But it's doing its job right now. So now that that's in place, we can go ahead and measure out what we need and cut it out. And it's pretty hard to get a good angle from the bottom here. But essentially, I'm just going to be doing this, buttoning it up and putting a mark about where I think it should be good enough to cut, which I think I already made a mark somewhere around here. I can't find it right now. I think it might be on the other side. Oh, there it is. See that right there? So I made a mark about where I want it. So now let's cut off all the excess here, and yeah, let's get this fully installed. All right, so I finished up with the oil line. I did have to do it one more time. Actually, I did that off camera. The line was just a bit too long. I know it's hard to see, but it's installed now and it's fitting good. So we got the turbo done, we got the exhaust done, modified, and we got the oil line done. I still have to clock the turbo, and I have to, just do a final install. I'm probably going to take off the oil line again, just to do a final leak down test, make sure it's not going to leak when everything is, running properly. But yeah, we got this all done, so I'm happy with it. All right, so I think that'll do it for today's video. I got the turbo system done, and obviously there's still a lot of work that needs to get done behind me. So I guess we'll see what we'll do next week. I still kind of don't know. Hopefully you guys found this video useful, and if you have anything to share, please feel free to let me know down in the comments. I might not respond super quickly, but I'll get to it. But yeah, without further ado, I'll see you guys next week. Take care.